Hello, you guys. Welcome back to the Confident Parenting Podcast. My name is Julie. I'm an occupational therapist and a mom of three. And today we're going to be talking about the tools and the mindsets that I think you need once you have a baby that are kind of legacy for you of how you used to be. So that's kind of confusing, but basically I have found through my experience with coaching moms in groups and individually, my own experience, just talking to friends, that we carry a lot of how we used to be, which is understandable, into our motherhood. And it leads to a lot of unhappiness and disappointment. And so today I really wanted to explore that with you. But before we jump into that, make sure you go ahead and subscribe. Give this video a like if you like talking about topics that relate to mindset, improving your parenting, helping you become a more present and confident parent. And let's jump into it. So let's preface this by saying that before you have a baby, there's a lot of preparation involved that I think we anticipate. Society helps us prepare with the registry and which hospital we're going to give birth at, and maybe the doctor we're going to choose or the healthcare provider. Maybe we're going to talk about our physical health. We're going to talk about prenatal classes and going to the gym and how much weight could we lift or how much can we walk? Can we travel? How far before we can't go on an airplane? How long before we can't fly on an airplane? Things like this, like very practical, obvious things that we do for preparation. Where I think a lot of us fall short is how do we prepare mentally and emotionally for having a baby? I think a lot of how society prepares us is through marketing. They know that new parents are vulnerable and there's so much pushed at us in terms of products and physical things that we might need as a parent, but we never really address the layer beneath that. And I see it come up so much because what I think happens is that a mom will have a baby, parents will have a baby, they become a little family or they expand their family, and it's just not what you thought it was going to be. You thought it was going to be maybe a lot easier, maybe a lot calmer. You could never have imagined how tired you might feel. Maybe you thought it would be easier to ask for help or that you wouldn't need help. Maybe you thought the transition back to work would be easier, and all of that comes with that once you have a baby. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to this equation for happiness, which is expectation and reality. The delta of that, the difference between those two concepts is happiness. And that kind of is a universal equation, I would say, but it relates a lot to parenting. I've had many conversations with women as coaching clients who will bring up this idea of just feeling unprepared of what it would be like. They might be a year into parenting, 2 years into parenting, heck, they may be 2 or 3 kids into parenting, and just wondering why they feel so deflated, why their energy is so low. And yes, that's because of lack of sleep. That's maybe because they have no time for themselves. That could be that their marriage is struggling a little bit with this new adjustment. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that they feel like they were sold a lie a little bit. And it's not really anyone's fault per se, but I'm here to help you at least think about this in your preparation before baby, because I don't see why it wouldn't help you to be more emotionally and mentally prepared for the changes that are going to take place. Some things that I feel like this comes up a lot in, and we even had a call about this today, is mom and career, mom and work. I found this to be very shocking, I guess, for myself. I was pregnant with my first child. I was all on track to return to work just like I had before. And right before I was supposed to go back, I was kind of in denial, if I'm honest. I didn't want to go back to work. My baby's now a few months old, and I just could not imagine leaving him. Like, who am I going to leave him with? But yet my job was waiting for me and expecting me to be there. And how do you reconcile that? Now you fast forward, you figure out some kind of childcare solution, and perhaps you go back to work, and it's just not the same. You just don't have the same energy to dedicate the same attention. Your priorities have shifted dramatically since becoming a parent. Things that you could never imagine and things that you might think intellectually, but when it's actually happening to you, it's hard to see yourself in that situation and what you would do. And I remember really struggling because it was a loss of identity for me. I was used to working at a certain level, have a certain standard for myself. I inherently expect other people to have that same standard. And now I have a baby and the stakes have just changed dramatically. And things that I wish I had known prior to having my child and then prior to making a big transition, like going back to work, is that these feelings are normal and everybody goes through them. I think every mom learning to juggle motherhood and work or going back to sort of her previous life, it could be as simple as trying to work out again. You used to work out 4 days a week when you were not a mom, and now all of a sudden you don't have that time for yourself anymore. It doesn't have to be your career that you're adjusting to. You're really adjusting to everything. And I think if you go into it with a bit more awareness of what it could be like and how others have also experienced it, the transition, the landing is a little softer, I feel like. So for work especially, I think a lot of moms really struggle. They don't feel like they have a right to say that they are struggling. And so they keep quiet about it. And we all know that these deeper, darker thoughts kind of fester in the darkness. When you don't speak up about it, when you don't go to therapy or have a coach or talk to your friends about it, or maybe your family, it just becomes a much bigger mountain to climb in your mind than it might be in reality with help and emotional support. And so I've had so many people feel like they are drowning, overwhelmed, that, maybe there's other things going on that they're not aware of. But actually, it's because they're trying to apply the version of them before they had a child to the version of them now with a child, trying to do everything that they used to do. And it's just impossible. A lot of society is structured this way, where we kind of just sweep under the rug the fact that we had a baby and keep on going, especially in certain professions like we know about in medical professions. You will lose your spot in a certain program, or you'll be viewed in a different way if you take a maternity leave. So women will often, take 2 or 3 weeks off, or maybe the 6 weeks that they're kind of allocated, and then have to go back to work. Or if they are given more time, which is wonderful, once they go back, they're expected to kind of perform at full capacity. And I'm sure that's not the case everywhere, but it is kind of common practice. We have inherited this workplace and world that was not geared for people to have children in that the children didn't come with you mentally to work. You left those at home. And because historically men have done a lot of the jobs that women now do, they never had to worry so much about, they were never going to be taking time off to be pregnant and have babies. So, and breastfeeding and all of the things. And so we've kind of inherited this legacy of some element of perfectionism, a standard that doesn't exist. And we're trying to hold ourselves to that when it's just impossible, because we are changed forever once we have a baby. And then once we try and blend those two worlds, it becomes very, very challenging. Something that used to really provide me with a lot of comfort when I was trying to kind of self-soothe, to use a parenting reference, because I wasn't really expressing a lot of this, at least not to my work world, maybe to my personal world, this overwhelming feeling of like, I can't do this all, and I'm always failing, and I'm not good at anything, and I'm dropping all the balls, and this legacy perfectionism that would creep in, because that's kind of how I used to run my life before children. I used to say to myself, my kids' their childhood has a time limit. They are not going to be this small and this maybe needy forever. My job and career, in theory, will always be there. And we can argue that women are penalized for taking time out of work, and that may be the case, and that is very unfortunate. But you probably, with enough effort, can get another job. Maybe it is not the job that you wanted, and it maybe is not the job that you would have had if you had stayed in that career and not taken any kind of break or time off to care for your kids. But jobs will continue to exist in some capacity, whereas your children will grow up and they will get on with their lives. And, hopefully you've raised someone who's independent and can go and create a life for themselves, and the cycle will repeat. But you won't have them at home anymore. They won't need you in the same way. And, we know that those first sort of 7 years of a child's life are so crucial to forming their subconscious, to forming how they're going to act in the world, what they're going to think about themselves. And so having you as a predominant caregiver, predominant voice, predominant influence in their life is so important. But it comes at a big cost to women that work or just want to live their lives like they used to. When you take on the idea of a parent, you are putting someone else ahead of you. And that's part of the deal. But I think we don't really realize that. And so then we're shocked when we have to give up so much of our personal time and we can't work out by ourselves or we can't return to our pre-working level. We're shocked. And I think it's because we are not mentally prepared for this transition. We prepare in other ways to become parents, but not mentally and emotionally. So what are some of the things that you can do if you find yourself pregnant for the first time or expecting a child? What can you do to make the landing a little softer, to really go in there with as wide open as possible without actually having had a baby? I always used to say, and I would say this to my clients too, like, I wish I had third parent energy with my first baby. In other words, I wish I had that experience and foresight with my third child that I had with my first child. But unfortunately, you kind of have to go through it. You really have to experience it to learn for yourself. But I do think there are ways to mentally prepare. Having conversations, consuming content like this just helps you think about a situation where you need to go in there knowing that you don't know and you don't know how it's going to feel. You need to have an open mind. You also need to be kind to yourself. I am someone who is not always kind, and I'm pretty judgmental of myself. And that has not served me well at all, because at the end of the day, it just makes me miserable. It kind of is like some kind of self-persecution where I'm falling short of this imaginary standard that I've set for myself. And because I can't meet it, I must be a failure, right? And that's not the case. I'm just a mom trying to do my best in all these areas of my life, trying to figure it out in a system that's not really set up for women to parent in a way that they want and also have this like top-notch career and also be the breadwinner, all these kind of things. Something has to give. And if you have to dedicate hours and hours to work, you're going to be dedicating less time to parenting. And if you're dedicating more time to parenting, you're going to be showing up less at work or not at all. So, these are all common things that we struggle with. And I think having these conversations out loud is very, very important. So when you find yourself on the other side of pregnancy, you have this baby, and now you're like, okay, I guess life has to continue now. We have to figure out how this child fits into our lives. I want you to think about how you can ask for help, how you can voice these concerns and realize that you're not alone, how if you are vulnerable and brave and are able to say, I am struggling with my identity because that was such a big part of me and now it's changed so much and I have to let this go and I'm clinging on for dear life, you will realize that many other women are in similar situations, and it might give you the courage to think outside the box when it comes to working, when it comes to how you structure your family, when it comes to maybe getting back into the workforce, because you can learn to realize, or you can realize that there are many different ways that you can do both. You don't have to work in a traditional job like you did before your baby. You could maybe work part-time. You could maybe work from home. You could change careers completely. Maybe there's a way to live smaller so that you don't have to work as intensely right now. There are just many creative ways that we can restructure our lives to fit in both children and raising them the way we want to or close to how we want to, and also having some kind of career and staying in touch with what you trained for. There are different ways to do it. It doesn't have to look exactly the same. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road for, as an analogy, where it's hard, where you want to do what you did before and you feel like your whole professional identity and actually your personal identity is tied up in that. And that's not the case. You are a complex human being that has many different identities, and you have taken on many different roles, and you will continue to take on many different roles throughout your life. Mothering and being a parent is the role that you're taking on right now. And just by nature of it, raising young children is very all encompassing. It's not something you can do part-time, and it's something that infiltrates every element of your life. And rather than also trying to fit your child into your career, how can you organize your lifestyle or change your lifestyle into to fit your family? So some things that I found people have found helpful is, for example, in work, not saying yes to every opportunity, not being lured in by the golden handcuffs or the shiny object syndrome, where they are saying things like, if you want this role, you have to give us more hours. Or if you want to take on this part of it, you need to take on more responsibility. You need to manage more people. Maybe you're just laying low. You're just trying to survive for those early childhood years. You're not taking on big projects or presentations or additional certifications, or you're not managing a big team. You're just hanging in there so that you can keep your job, so that you can do what you can handle well enough before taking on other things. There might be a time in life where you feel like you have the capacity to do that. There might not be, and that's okay. I also think what's something we don't recognize is, depending on when you have children and depending on how old you are aging as well as your children, and you might not have the stress tolerance to take on new things at work that you had 10 years ago. You just might not be hormonally in the same spot that you were when you were younger, where you are more resilient, where you can kind of get away with less sleep and take on more challenging roles, and it's okay, you can manage it. It might cause you a lot of anxiety. It might cause you a lot of distress, and that's because you're putting on too much on your plate, and your body and your mind can't handle it, and that's okay. And I think letting go of this idealism will really serve you to be happier and be more content with your life. You can live small in some areas in order to live bigger in others. And the bigger might be having the children right now, and the smaller might be your career and your hobbies and even friendships. Sometimes I do talk about this a lot, but female friendships, at least to me, are very important. And I feel like we do really need them, but we also might not be in the phase of life where we are pouring so much into creating new friends. Maybe we only have one or two, and that's okay. And that's all we can kind of keep up with right now. But remember, the delta of happiness is expectation and reality. If we expect to have this massive friendship group and to be going on trips all the time and, socializing and hosting everybody all the time, but in reality, we just can't manage that. And then we're unhappy because we're falling short. That's an expectation problem. That's putting too much pressure on ourselves and not really seeing what are we like right now? Not wishing our fantasy self was the reality, or expecting our fantasy self to guide how we live our lives. The last thing I'll say on this topic is that the cost of not facing what your real situation is that you will get to a point of burnout or just feeling so overwhelmed that you really just revenge quit the whole situation. So in the case of a job, which is easy to understand, I find, and this happened to me too, in a way, if you are not able to sustain something, this can happen actually with working out too. I feel like that's a good example as well. If you're unable to sustain something, so you're doing way too much and it's just going on for too long, you eventually will get to a breaking point where all you want to do is quit. And maybe that was the right choice. Maybe you should have quit that job. Maybe it wasn't the right job for you. But if you want to be able to have some consistency, bring in some income, still keep a career going, have a job, you need to do the bare minimum that you can do to get by, to still do a good job, but also maintain your sanity. It's just not worth it. At the end of the day, your mental health is as important as your physical health. And if you don't have that, you can't do anything. You can't parent, and you can't work, and you can't work out, and you can't be a good friend. You can't be a good spouse. So it's really, really important to know how much is on the line when it comes to this idea of letting go of this former identity that might be toxic for you right now, might not be the right thing for you right now. So I hope that this video is helpful to anyone who needs it out there. I know I've really struggled with this. I got a lot of identity, and a lot of my self-esteem was tied into my job and my career before I had children, and just, I worked so hard to get where I was, and then to sort of have it all taken away because my priorities shifted by having a baby, it was a lot to deal with. It was affronting because I just didn't think that would be the case. I thought I could do it all. I thought I could have this career and have a full-time job and still kind of keep it going and maintain my home life in the way that I wanted to. And the reality was, in order for me to do that, I needed someone else to raise my kids. I needed to have a nanny or someone else there who would be a predominant influence. And I guess I'm just too much of a control freak, and I couldn't do it. I just felt so guilty that I was leaving my children. And, some of that was also probably wrapped into hormones and like postpartum feelings and lack of sleep, but also just biology. We're designed to look after our children and be there for them and have eyes on them most of the time. And I wanted to be the biggest influence in my kid's life. So call me a control freak, but that's how I am wired. And I don't regret that decision to step away from my job, because I know that I could get it back to in some level, in some way, if I chose to. I could probably find another job and slowly work my way up in a time of my life where my children don't need me as much. So I hope this provides some kind of inspiration or hope for you out there if you are struggling with having a baby for the first time, or this transition once you have the baby, getting back into your normal life again. It's normal to feel all kinds of chaos inside, and I want you to ask for help and reach out to people that you love and trust when those feelings come up for you, because I guarantee you're not alone. Everybody relates to this, whether you're going back to a high corporate career or you're just trying to get back into your genes. Everybody goes through this transition of like, wow, this is not what I thought it would be. So I feel like there's a lot of us out there that can relate. If you are feeling like this and you want to reach out, leave a comment down below, and make sure you subscribe if you like topics about mindset and confident parenting and really being deliberate and intuitive with how you raise your children. And give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.